Welcome to the party. How is Kirk Cousins actually looking in Minnesota Vikings camp? And Garrett Bradbury has issues. That's all coming up on the Minnesota Football Party today. I'm Sam Ekstrom, your host, joined by Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings host, and Arif Hasan of theathletic.com. Luke Inman today taking a day to himself, little PTO. He's off. He'll rejoin us on Thursday. We also have a guest of honor, Mystery Mondays. Guest of honor coming up later. Luke, Arif, what do you have for me? Luke, tell me about your background. Where are you right now?
I'm at my sister's place in Chanhassen, so I'm away from my normal setup, but I'll be able to go to camp this week.
That is good. We will see you out there at TCO. Arif is back in his usual lair. Arif, how was your weekend, dude?
It was all right. Nothing awful, nothing great. I'm just a boring guy.
Well, I know what you did. You went to Vikings camp. I was off over the weekend, so let's start by going to our correspondent, Arif. Boots on the ground. Arif Hasan, tell us what we missed over the weekend.
I mean, we saw some unpadded practices. We saw some padded practices. I think, we missed some opportunities for some dark horses to make their claim. I mean, Myron Mitchell was injured for a portion of practices. I've been keeping my eye on him because he's been able to get open. But, for the most part, it's been more of the same. I think we've seen some really exciting plays from KJ Osborne. We saw some ups and downs, struggles and successes from Andrew Booth. We saw some more consistent performances from Cameron Dancer, which I think a lot of us like to see. We saw some 3 safety sets again. That's something that's been kind of like a theme here. We saw some offensive line, defensive line drills where I think we might see, and you were already alluding to this, we might see some competition at center, and the right guard competition is shaping up to be a little bit better, at least from what I've seen so far, than I had expected coming into camp. So is there anything I missed there that you wanted me to cover?
I want to dig into some of it. And now, Luke Braun, you're going to be at camp this week, but you've been at camp, previous years as well, and you've seen Justin Jefferson in a camp setting. I've said this aloud to Arif, and I'm eating my words this year. Justin Jefferson, to me, in his first 2 camps, did not wow. He was not spectacular. I felt like he was clearly gifted, but when it came to playmaking, somewhat ordinary. This camp has been extraordinary for Justin Jefferson. First, I want to hear if Luke agrees with that, and then Luke Braun. Did I say Luke? I want to hear if Arif agrees with it, and then I want to hear Luke Braun give his thoughts on that original premise.
So I've been giving Sam a bit of guff for this statement that he's made, but actually, full transparency, when he said it, I kind of agreed. I hedged a little bit, but I kind of agreed, right? That Justin Jefferson seems to save his playmaking exclusively for the regular season. But in this camp, we've seen a lot of really exciting highlights. And I think, people tend to forget how pedestrian Justin Jefferson was in the first camp and how kind of, maybe not under the radar, but how kind of exciting he was in the second camp. But the pedestrian first camp, I think, is a story that needs to be pounded into the ground when people, do their revisionist history on Justin Jefferson and so on. But in this camp, he has been exciting. He's been winning contested catches. He's been, making big plays downfield. He's been generating yards after the catch, although, of course, that's always impossible to determine in a camp setting. And he's been winning at all 3 levels of the field against all kinds of coverages, against all kinds of corners. The only guy that seems to be able to even slow him down is Patrick Peterson. I think that's a pretty good sign.
Luke Braun.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to go to camp in 2020 because it was COVID. But
Right.
it sounded like he was pretty bad at that camp. And then last camp, we might just be misremembered because he got hurt pretty early in it and then was basically shut down for a while with the shoulder injury. So we didn't see him for a bunch of that camp. But I remember sitting there watching him before that injury and thinking this dude's going to explode the world. So if he's taken a step up, and I think part of that might actually be a connection with Kirk Cousins, a chemistry with Kirk Cousins. I wish Inman were here. Chemistry. But that seems like it has reached a great level in year 3. And if that can continue into the regular season, we might be able to see more consistency out of that pairing. And boy, that's scary. That should horrify you, defenses.
Yeah, I think that Luke makes a good point because to my eye, Kirk Cousins has been more aggressive this camp than he has in any recent camps that I've observed. And I think that's going to be the key, is to reprogram his brain, if that's possible, to have that aggressive mindset in the regular season, even if it comes at the expense of some interceptions. And he has thrown those in camp as well. But Arif, am I crazy to think that Kirk has looked as free throwing the football this camp as he had in any year in the Kubiak system?
You know, I don't like words that are difficult to interpret. I like precision of language. Free is a tough one for me. But I will say he has looked
liberated.
Better. Now, I'm not a guy that I mean, he looks aggressive. He looks like he's willing to take some shots. Those shots are working out.
Unencumbered?
For him, so in that sense, I think so. Unencumbered. I mean, he's not usually wearing a backpack in practices, so I don't know. But no, I think that he's looked good. Now, I'm not a guy that usually watches Kirk Cousins in camp. I think the first camp he was here, paid a lot of attention to him to see how he was doing. But honestly, he's generally been a background character in camp, in part because that's who he is as a quarterback. He's a paint by numbers. You call the play, he executes the play, and that's what occurs kind of on the field, right? You know, that's just kind of who he is, and that's how camp is played out. But this year, I think that we're seeing kind of a more exciting Cousins. Again, I'm not paying as much attention to him as I am the other players because Kirk's making the roster. He's the starter. But fewer interceptions. I know that a lot of people wanted to harp on that first interception he threw to Andrew Booth. First, because it's exciting. It's Andrew Booth. Second, because, you know, starting off camp with an interception is always very funny. But he's thrown fewer interceptions. He's won a lot of 2-minute drills. The only 2-minute drill he hasn't won, I believe, was the most recent one where you needed a touchdown to win. But you know, if you remember the first two, or the middle two camps with Kirk Cousins in the Mike Zimmer era, he didn't win a single 2-minute drill in training camp over the course of those two camps. Not a single one. In fact, even going into practices, he had difficulty winning 2-minute drills. And that replicated itself on the field. Now we're watching him win 2-minute drills in training camp. One of them was, you know, he needed a touchdown to win. He got that. A couple of them where he needed a field goal to win. He got in range. He got helped a little bit because driving, you know, down the field to set up a 52-yard field goal is not exactly heroic behavior. But, you know, a win's a win, right? And that's what he set up. And this most recent one where he had to set up a touchdown to win, he didn't get. But this is miles better than we're used to seeing from him in terms of the ability to kind of close out in situational football drills. And it's nice. Might say something about the defense. Remember, the defense has been horrible this past year in 2-minute drills. But I really like kind of what we're seeing from Cousins, his ability to kind of avoid the middle of the field in time pressure situations, but still generate big plays. Not something I think that he was really well known for in the past couple of years. So, you know, I'm not a Kirk hype train guy, but if Kirk is set for a historic season, it would look a lot like this at the beginning.
Yeah, and to some extent, I'm just trying to call it like I see it, with also not being a Kirk hype train guy, but I am seeing a different Kirk than last year when it really was a train wreck on all fronts.
Yeah.
He looked sloppy. He looked like he wasn't on the same page with his receivers, wasn't on the same page with his head coach. So, I mean, Luke Braun, is it safe to say, too, that the offense could be ahead of the defense in this particular setting when they have a lot more continuity, I would say, just with the togetherness and the key pieces being back together, whereas the defense is learning an entirely new scheme and has a lot of new faces?
Yeah, it's hard because, you know, with certain drills, the offense will have a huge advantage, like on one-on-ones, and then in other drills, the defense will have an advantage. If I remember, I don't know if this ever got verified or not, but like, wasn't Mike Zimmer like tipping off plays to the defense so that they knew like Mike Zimmer would call plays knowing what the offense's play call was, and that would like make the defense look way ahead of where they were. But if I remember last year,
Dunn at Go Long Sports. So yeah, that was a bit of reporting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And if I remember last year, after Kirk Cousins came back from the COVID kerfuffle, he was like downright bad. And we were like, uh-oh, did COVID ruin Cousins for a hot second? And so we can absolutely compare these to past training camps and see whatever was going on at those past training camps, what we are seeing now is better. And whether that translates to regular season success or not, I mean, it would be irresponsible to try to make that guess, I think. But it sure can't be bad news that he's like suddenly looks a lot sharper and on a great page with Jefferson and Osborne and Thielen. Like, that's got to be good, right?
It's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, I would say Osborne has had an exquisite camp. Jefferson's had a great camp. Thielen has made his share of great grabs. He's just doing what Thielen does. Arif, we lean on you a lot because you're a really good resource, and I'm going to lean on you again here. Obviously, the Bradbury competition at center is the big story from the weekend. How would you say that narrative stacks up with your notes from the one-on-ones? Because I know that's something you pay particular attention to. I was really interested to hear Kevin O'Connell like single that out early in last week to say, hey, that's something that we pay attention to as well. How is Bradbury actually holding up in those drills?
Terribly. it is a drill that is biased against offensive linemen and biased against centers in particular. I believe I went over that on the last show. But even after accounting for how stacked the deck is against centers who often have help, who often don't have to deal with the amount of space that defensive linemen are get, who often have to hold up in a one-on-one drill longer than they would on a passing play. All of that said, it has been really concerning levels of play. I mean, it starts off worse. He's gotten better since the beginning of padded practices. In fact, he actually didn't have a bad showing in Saturday one-on-one drills with the most recent padded practices. But for the most part, it has been extremely concerning. He has lost to Harrison Phillips. He's lost to Dalvin Tomlinson. He has lost in team drills to various nose tackles and defensive tackles that have stunted into his gap. He's done poor on stunts, which is somewhat unusual. He's actually not that bad at handling stunts and twists in general. But it has been very concerning. And of course, Kevin O'Connell saying that, pass protection is an issue for Garrett Bradbury, or an area where, he's got an opportunity to improve, or I forget exactly what wording O'Connell used. But that pass protection he singled out as a particular challenge for him. That I think tells us that this is kind of on his mind. And seeing how well Chris Reed has done, like sometimes I'll take notes and I'll just write down the jersey numbers of players and not kind of interpret what I'm watching. And so I'm like, hey, who's been the best backup offensive lineman? 62. Who's 62? Who's 62? Who's 62? Oh, it's Chris Reed, right? It's kind of one of those situations where Reed has kind of jumped out, again, mostly against backups, but Reed has jumped out as a particularly good performer in one-on-one drills. And so I think that creates a huge opportunity for the Vikings to maybe upgrade at center and guard as opposed to just guard.
So, Arif, what you describe is not necessarily a decline from Bradbury. It's just default Bradbury. This is who he's been.
Yep.
This is probably who he's going to be. So, Luke Braun, last week you busted out the tinfoil hat. I want you to put on your Kwesi hat. Whether you believe it or not, I want you to make the justification as if you are Kwesi for why the center position was not addressed in free agency or the draft. Give me your best validation of the approach the Vikings took.
Probably the 2023 class. It's supposed to be a good center class, so they're probably just trying to time that up where you'll have Bradbury, or if Chris Reed beats him, you do that and then kind of limp that through this season. And sure, it'll be a roster hole, and then you can kind of approach the draft next year with needs at the positions that are deepest in that draft. I think that's always the way. That's the way Rick Spielman wanted to navigate the draft, where your needs kind of always aligned with what was available, and you weren't sitting there going, oh, shoot, like the Steelers, right? They need a quarterback really bad. This is a bad quarterback draft. It's a bad situation, and it's one they want to avoid at every position. So that would be my guess. It does seem like it was a fundamentally unserious attempt to get competition for Bradbury. Even as the last Bradbury fan, even I said they should probably get competition for Garrett Bradbury. And Chris Reed has never taken a live snap in a meaningful game at center. It's always either been preseason or camp, and he's never taken that in like a meaningful regular season or playoff game. So that feels like very unserious. And if they lucked out and he happens to be this great upgrade, that's great. But haven't there been like a bunch of snap exchange issues? And is he communicating with things right and all that? Like, it seems very unserious. It seems very similar to saying, well, Oli Udoh had a good camp. Let's just trot him out at right guard, which was a catastrophe. It seems very almost negligent. But if you're going to neglect a position, the first thing I would always do is say, okay, how is next year's draft class looking? Because that might explain it.
Yeah, it is problematic for the decision makers that Garrett Bradbury is very good pre-snap, like in the moments before the snap, diagnosing coverages, executing the snap. These are all things Garrett Bradbury is good at, and then the 4 seconds of pass
that we take for granted
is where it all falls apart. Snap issues, Arif, I would say almost more of a Mond issue, honestly. I mean, he seems to be
I would argue it's more of a Mond issue, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason I say the snap issues are more of a Mond issue is because, when you're watching the shotgun snaps that he fumbles, they're placed perfectly. They're exactly where they need to be. And part of that, like, you know, a perfect snap, you know, the laces are where they need to be and stuff like that. Maybe that's not happening, but who cares? That's on the quarterback at that point if the ball is where it needs to be. But second, it's occurring regardless of whether or not it's Schlottman or Reed under center. And that's the issue, right? Like, if it was just one of them, I'd say, you know, I can see kind of like, hey, maybe it's Reed, but it's occurring on both shotgun and under center snaps. It's also occurring when it's Schlottman and when it's Reed, and Schlottman has been a career center. Like, if it's just Reed, it's like, well, okay, he hasn't played center in actual NFL games. He's primarily played center in practices. You know, that's, you know, getting the center snap exchange is difficult. You know, that was kind of the whole conversation about, you know, Creed Humphrey and Patrick Mahomes, which, you know, I guess that didn't matter. He ended up being the best center in the NFL year one. But, you know, that's a kind of a critical part of the equation. And like Luke said, you can't ignore it, right? The snap occurs on every play. You cannot have a situation where, you know, 1 out of every 30 plays or twice a game is an automatic fumble. That's just untenable, right? And that is kind of one reason that you wouldn't go Mason Cole long term, right? Is because he could persistently have snap issues throughout his career, despite how much of a better blocker he is. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen on a play? A turnover. Maybe don't start the process that way. So, yeah, these are all like really important things. But I think in this case, it is a bit more of a Mond issue for, at least it turns out, like a couple of reasons as I've been watching these.
Yeah, it feels like the way that Kevin O'Connell has talked about Bradbury, and he has been honest about Bradbury, and he's not sitting there trying to tell you, actually, he's bigger. He's not going to get bowled over anymore. Like, nobody should believe that. And if you're trying to hold out your hope that he's going to go up against a 340-pound nose tackle and not get walked back, the best you can hope for is that he can hop it a little bit and slow it down, right? And hopefully Kirk Cousins can get rid of the ball. That's always going to be who Bradbury is, and it represents this like devil's bargain that the last staff gladly accepted with Garrett Bradbury, and that he was like, okay, we're going to take this pass protection issue, and in return we get, you know, comfort with the snaps, we get comfort with the communication, we get comfort with reach blocking and all the run blocking things that Garrett Bradbury offers, and we're going to take all that, and in exchange we have to deal with the pass protection issue. And it seems like, at least headed into camp, the Vikings made that same devil's bargain. And if Chris Reed does happen to be a better center and ends up starting week one and represents an improvement at center, that feels like a stroke of luck rather than like, oh, good job, Kwesi, you fixed the problem. That kind of feels like it's an accident.
They had 6 of the top 18 PFF centers available on the market, and they did not go after them. And J.C. Treader is still among those 6 and still available. I want to get into the weeds with our Rankum segment of the day. I've given you each 4 names of fringe Minnesota Vikings. I want you to rank the likelihood that they make the 53-man roster. The names are as follows: Vidarian Lowe, 6th-round tackle; Jalen Naylor, 6th-round receiver; Asezi Otomewu, 5th-round defensive end; and Nick Muse, the 7th-round tight end. So it's Lowe, Naylor, Otomewu, and Nick Muse. We begin with Luke Braun.
So I'll go best chance first. Feels like Naylor, because he's had a couple of camp highlights, but also the most he has to do is beat out like Albert Wilson. Maybe be a punt returner. That's a way to make it. There seems like a lot of avenues in the path to him, to the roster for him, is a little easier. Otomewu is probably second for me. It seems like he's had a better camp than I expected, but I'm still going off of draft priors a little bit. But he probably has the easiest path to the roster because that edge depth is such a problem. After Daniil Hunter and za'darius Smith, it's backups and busts. So if Otomewu can show anything, he has a pretty good path to the roster. I don't hate either of those guys' chances. Vidarian Lowe feels like he could be okay, but behind Blake Brandel and Oli Udoh, that feels like a more difficult path to the roster, so I'll go third with him. And Nick Muse seems like a completely forgotten man who got leapfrogged by Zach Davidson. I'm pretty worried about that. I don't think that this is the year for him.
Arif.
I'll start with Naylor. No reason to repeat Luke's reasoning here. It's correct. I mean, he's got the easiest path. He could also just make it outright as a receiver. I'll note that his past couple of practices have been better as a receiver than his first couple of practices, so he might even be able to make it outright as a receiver. But the punt return job is sparse in terms of talent. I think the only person he has to beat, like Luke said, is Albert Wilson. I don't think KJ Osborne, Amir Smith, Marset, or Tommy Hennigan pose serious threats to that part of the roster. So there's that. I think with Odomewo and Lowe, I would say it's a bit of a tie. I think in terms of roster path, Lowe might have it a little bit better, but I think Odomewo's upside and the draft capital the Vikings invested in and the priors that they're bringing, not just, Luke and us, but that they're bringing into the evaluation will put Odomewo second. I was thinking about putting him third. And the reason is actually this, is that Odomewo is not playing the edge. He's playing, the 5 technique position. Now, obviously, he can be shadow depth at the edge, right? In the same way that like James Lynch could, in theory be shadow depth along the edge, right? It's just that, you want to have them on the inside. They've bulked up. And so he's playing on the inside. And that is actually a little bit more difficult because we know Armon Watts is almost certainly the starter, especially based on camp performances thus far. And then you've got kind of this glut of players ahead of him, like, a Jalen Twyman and a James Lynch and so on. There's only so many players he can carry. So it is a difficult path, but Lowe would have to make it as basically a 10th offensive lineman or a second tackle. And he'd have to prove that he's better than Blake Randall, who is fine, actually, given kind of the position that he's being expected to play. So that'd be difficult. I see Lowe as a practice squad stash. And then finally, I just don't see a ton of room otherwise, right? I don't see a ton of room for Nick Muse. I think that, Zach Davidson has done enough. I'm not a huge Zach Davidson guy. I know you are. But Zach Davidson has done enough to at least be ahead of Nick Muse and Sean Byer on the tight end depth chart. If they only keep 3, that would be tough for Davidson, but certainly Muse would not be in that equation. If they keep 4, which I think is the maximum number of tight ends they keep, I still don't see how Nick Muse makes it. So those are my 4.
Yeah, logic pretty similar. Naylor number 1, and maybe I'm a little number biased because I see Albert Wilson wearing number 25, but whenever he runs a route, I can't help but think, oh, look at that running back doing a nice little wheel route. That's cute. Yeah. That's adorable. Me too. He does not look like a wide receiver, and I guarantee you it's the number. It's a major number bias, and this is the problem with the NFL shaking up all the numbers and throwing them into a pot.
Tom Brady
and now
was right.
Can wear them. Tom Brady was right. I'm so confused. It really is a reporter issue as much as it is like confusing the players. I think just to shake things up, I would put a Tomewo third on the list, and I would put Lowe number 2 because I feel like the tackle depth is just as dire as the edge depth. Now, granted, you're going to dip into your edge depth probably a little more than your tackle depth because you're not rotating offensive linemen just by nature. But Brandel and Udo are in contract years. Udo is not good. I'm not sure he makes the team. And I think that you'd like to have a good, tackle prospect on your roster for at least the next couple of years and not risk a practice squad poach. So for that reason, I would put in number 2, Odomewo 3. And Nick Muse has been a bit of an afterthought. And again, he's wearing the wrong number. Number 34, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. I think I think it's Jake Bargas. I'm like, oh, difficult. Jake, right. Jake Bargas, another grab. He's really active in the passing game. I get so confused. So that's my list. But honestly, guys, like the way the practice squad looks these days and the rules and like the ability to elevate them freely, it's almost like an extension of the roster. I mean, all of these guys could easily be practice squad additions and, even make a roster appearance once or twice. It just seems like teams are like constructed so much differently or freely. Like you don't have to necessarily keep a 6th-round pick on your 53-man just for the sake of him being a draft pick because you know that you're probably going to be able to keep him around.
Yeah, I think all of these players will either make the 53 or the practice squad or be claimed on waivers. And honestly, I think we tend to overstate the risk of slipping a guy through onto the practice squad. It happens pretty rarely that someone grabs somebody off of waivers, and particularly really for a 6th-round pick, right? Because you have to, in order to grab somebody off of waivers, you have to put them on your 53, right? Like you have to cut a guy that you've been watching for, 3-4 weeks for a guy that you've never seen based off of your draft priors. But also your draft priors were such that you didn't want to draft him even into the 6th round, right? So it's a pretty rare scenario. We tend to overstate it. There are some times when we should be concerned. I think, for example, if we're having a discussion about Kellen Mond, right? If whether or not, the Vikings should cut him in a 2-quarterback system and have Sean Mannion, which is a whole other discussion. We could take up a whole other podcast about that. Then you have to worry about practice squad sniping. 100%. That one's a difficult one. Verdarian Lowe, I think he'll probably make his way through.
Before we continue, and I've got a good talker here around the corner, I'm going to tell everybody about betonline.net, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. My tout of the Jaguars plus 2.5 in the Hall of Fame game came up short, but it won't deter me from having a big opinion on the Raiders and Vikings this weekend. Listen to Thursday's show for that. And head to betonline.net to check out all of the lines for the upcoming NFL season. They've also got NHL, NBA futures, esports, golf, everything you can imagine. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is inspired by an ESPN Plus list ranking the under 25 talent in the NFL. Vikings ranked 14th. My question to you guys, besides Justin Jefferson, your favorite under 25 prospect on the Minnesota Vikings. If you need to quick consult me on who's what age, because I know it's a little bit ambiguous for some guys, feel free. I'm your resource. I'm here for you. But top of head, favorite under 25 player on the Vikings. That does not include 25. KJ Osborne does not count. Under 25. Luke Braun.
Danielle Hunter's only 19 years old, right? So he can just...
Yeah. Matt Stafford is 23.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have to go with Irv Smith, I think. At least in terms of the one with the brightest future. I know people are really worked up about his injuries. We talked about last time, or at least I talked about why I'm not as worried about the thumb thing. It might hold him out for a week or two, or have him, be that much harder to catch for a week or two, but it's not a long-term issue. And I just can't get over what I saw from him when I was at camp last year. It just seemed like he had transcended to some greater plane. I'm sure there are other guys that I'm really excited about that are forgetting. My favorite, like the guy I'm going to be rooting hardest for, is Andrew Booth, because all he wants to do is fight you, and I think that rocks. But in terms of the brightest future, I just cannot quit Irv Smith, and I think we're all going to see exactly what people who are at camp saw last year as soon as he's back from that thumb.
He turns 24 tomorrow.
Oh, look at that.
Ooh, happy early birthday.
So most exciting player to watch, probably Kene Nwangwu. Probably most exciting player to deploy, probably Lewis Seen. Brightest future, I'm going to have to go with Christian Darrisaw. I think while maybe the people leaking stuff to National about how he's Trent Williams might be a little bit overeager, he has genuinely been quite good in camp. I mean, he's held his own against Danielle Hunter, which is the best you can ask, especially in a one-on-one scenario. And he's won way more than he's lost against Za'darius Smith, right? I mean, that's not bad, right? There's not an edge rusher that has been consistently good against him. The closest has been Danielle Hunter, right? I think that he's moving well. I think that, kind of the issues with injury that he had last year, plus, the inability to kind of practice and develop as a result of the multiple surgeries, really limited him. And I think so far what we're seeing right now is a fairly high level tackle. I'm not going to put him in like a top 5 conversation or anything like that, but I will put a pin on that because I think that is possible.
Do you think he's been better than Riley Reif at versus
Yes.
Danielle Hunter? Like if you compare the reps for, yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Let me just clean up some of the names that didn't get mentioned. Ezra Cleveland, I think being slept on a little bit.
I think he's fine. Yeah.
He's fine. Yeah, but not like the most exciting.
Yeah. No, I mean,
think he's improving
far from
too.
it.
I'm pretty excited about the direction he's going to go in. I don't think he enters the conversation, but yeah, I think he's worth this kind of honorable mention / highlight that Sam is giving him. He's doing well.
Cam Dantzler, I think he and Cleveland both have a chance to take enormous steps this year. Massive. Yeah. And I'm of the persuasion
Luke, you haven't been
that
watching
Dantzler...
Cam Dantzler in camp. I see your face, Luke. Dantzler's been good in camp.
Oh, I have no idea. I'm like really excited to watch Cam Dantzler in camp.
Yeah. Okay. Just it's difficult to tell with the sunglasses what your reaction is.
And I think there's a big opinion from the outside that Andrew Booth is like this shoe-in to unseat Dantzler. And I strongly disagree. I think Dantzler is 85% your starter. Arif, would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Well, it really depends on what we mean by starter, right? Because if it's week 1, I think we've got maybe 85% chance that Cameron Dantzler starts. If it's by the end of the season, that one's a little bit more tough. I think that Dantzler is 60-40 going to take more snaps if both are healthy than Andrew Booth. But I could see Booth kind of overtaking him by the end of the season. But Dantzler's been like good. And remember, we're used to seeing cornerbacks not really be good until their third year, right? Trey Waynes, Xavier Rhodes, even Mackenzie Alexander for a bit. Because Mackenzie Alexander's like third year with the Vikings is fairly underrated given kind of everything else. But but I mean, it's Cameron Dantzler, third year, right? We've got an opportunity for him to be a pretty interesting player.
With he and Booth, it could just be injury roulette. Who's healthy on a given week is your starter.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got some matchsticks between the two of them. You can just break at any time.
You guys want to play a game before we get to our Mystery Monday guest?
You know I hate games.
Yeah.
Great, let's do it. So I usually do this on a podcast every year during training camp. Name where that guy went to college. We're going to do it weakest link style. I don't know if you guys watch the show. I do. Jane Lynch, great host, great show. Love it. Love how mean she is. We're going to alternate. So you have a list of 5 in alternating fashion, best of 5 wins. I'm going to give you fairly obscure Vikings. You tell me the college they went to. You get a point if you get it right. If you get it wrong, then I will do a manual mouth buzzer. Something like that. Okay?
All right.
Make it a different sound every time. Surprise us.
Okay. I like that twist, Arif. Thank you. Luke Braun, because you made the long journey to Chanhassen. You might be next door to Ron Johnson, by the way. He's a Chanhassen guy.
Yeah. Very good.
We're going to let you start. Number 1, Jonathan Bullard.
Oh, boy. This is going to be a guess. I usually would be so much better at this, but I did history instead of backstories this summer. I have no idea, so I'm just going to throw out a random one. Cal.
Florida, wrong coast. Luke is 0 for 1. Arif probably has a little advantage. He's got that roster in his hand more often than Luke does at practice. Mike Brown.
Shoot, I think I know. It's like an Ohio school, I think. It's not, maybe it's Miami of Ohio?
Wow, he nailed it. Yes, that's correct. Wow. Good job.
Oh my God.
That might be the game winner right there.
I can't
Might be
believe that.
1-0. This will be a soccer game.
Luke Braun, Andrew DePaula.
Rutgers. Right? Or
Correct.
It was, yeah, it was Rutgers.
Yep. You're good. Don't screw with yourself.
Good thing you didn't change it.
I wouldn't have gotten that. Yeah.
Greg Schiano's
That was
Rutgers.
fast.
Yeah, Greg Schiano's, yeah.
I wrote a whole feature
Yeah,
on
and
it.
DePaula is super old. He's like 38
Yeah.
million.
He was
Nate,
he was out of football for 4 years before he got a pro job.
one of those like bagging grocery stories. Just
A little bit, yeah.
discovered like yeah.
Yeah, so he was on the roster a lot.
Working at a
for
Best
Luke
Buy
to do a roster review. Yeah, I'm gonna get screwed out of the rest of this round.
Nate Hairston.
Oh God, I should know this too. Oh no. He feels like a Power 5 guy. Let me go Ohio State.
Temple.
Temple. Not even a Power 5 guy. Oh.
1 for
Sorry,
2,
Matt.
both of you. Back to Luke. Thomas Hennigan.
Oh. I'm pretty sure it's small. Yeah, this is going to be another guess. Why does my brain want to say Western Kentucky? Sure, I don't know. I'm guessing.
Can I take a guess just for my own edification?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
App State?
Oh yeah, that's
Appalachian State? Is that it?
A shame that we're not doing steals because that is right.
Right.
Arif.
Yeah.
Okay.
Luke
Okay.
Braun.
Ooh.
1 for 3. Arif, see if you can capture that magic that you just had with Hennigan. Tristan Jackson.
Ah, boo! I don't know who this is. I mean, I know who he is. He's constantly.
He's been around for a couple of years. Surely you would have looked at his college at some point.
Yeah, surely. Yeah, come on, Arif. You went to Trinity or East Central Oklahoma. You should know.
Our director, Matt DeBritz, probably knows. He's a fan of this school.
Actually, that doesn't help me at all. That gets rid of my East Central Oklahoma guess. I don't know, UTEP.
Syracuse. The Orange.
Oh.
All right, down to our final two guesses each. 1 for 3, each of you. Bryant Koback. Luke Braun.
Bryant Koback. I can see the document in my brain and I can't read it.
Got a generous UDFA bonus.
He did.
5.
It's like my brain wants to say
3.
West Virginia.
I mean, you're in the right time zone, I think. Toledo is the correct answer. Bang.
Toledo. Oh yeah, you're right.
Wah. All right, Arif, a chance to take a.
I get it.
Looking to take a nice lead into the final round. Zach McLeod.
Miami, Florida.
Arif has a monopoly on the Miamis. That is correct.
Boy, thank you, Miamis. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Luke
Thanks.
Braun,
Thanks for doing that.
to stay alive, needs to get T.Y. McGill.
I'm not going to get T.Y. McGill. Michigan State. I have no idea. No, it's not Michigan State, but I'll say Michigan State because anything else I'll say is wrong. I'm guessing out of 100 colleges.
If I told you it was a state, it is a state. Would you get one chance to change?
It is a state.
It is a state.
Ohio State.
Down.
It's not going to help me.
Oh,
I've let you down.
No, it's.
You should get
NC
used to me letting you down.
NC
State.
Okay. At least it wasn't like Jackson State. That would have been awful. Yeah, it's a state. Go for it.
I was really hoping one of you would just blow me away with your college knowledge. Night practice, Luke Braun, what are you looking for?
I'm going to look right at the O-line. I'm really interested to see what's going on the interior. I know it's messy, but I like a little mess. I'm excited to watch that. I'm excited to see what everybody's so hyped about with Darisaw. I'm really excited to see this Cameron Dantzler, Andrew Booth thing. I want to see Andrew Booth try to fight someone. I love that, and I want to see it. It's very fun. But I'm also really curious to see what everybody's talking about with Cameron Dantzler. So that's going to be what I'm paying the most attention to, especially in times like I don't need to watch Sean Mannion throw it. I'll watch, the 2s and the 3s on the offensive line and stuff will be a little more interesting to me, especially that cornerback room.
Luke, are you in the stands or on the sideline?
I will be with the riffraff in the stands.
Are you going to ruin the Vikings' chances of winning a Super Bowl and give video clips to other teams and hurt the franchise? Are you going to violate KOC's request?
I will not take video because I never take video. I never bother to. I'll tweet stuff a lot about like competitions, but I don't usually take video. But I will talk a lot of X's and O's on Locked On Vikings, going off of old McVay concepts and things so that fans can understand what they're looking at. And I think that's good. And anything that a fan like me will be able to surmise, the Green Bay Packers should be able to do with one eye closed.
You should tweet as if you're typing out the alt text to the image that your brain is taking a picture of.
I'll just start tweeting out like play names. Be like, they did choice return completion for 5 to KJ Osborne.
Right. Well, you should choose as many ambiguous play names as possible, right? Like choice has a couple of meanings. That's a good one. Ghost tosser, that one's pretty good. Texas, perfect. That one is like 3 different routes according to whoever is designing the playbook. So try to choose route names based off of how common they are amongst different routes.
Let's sneak in our party fouls.
No post routes. We know what that is.
Our guest arrives. Tell me what I don't know what a post route is. What's a post route? No, I'm joking. Party fouls of the week. I'll start. Actually, do we have the fun graphic? Party fouls. We can work that in. Yeah, I love that. My party foul of the week is the NFL demanding a point of clarification on illegal contact. Nobody wants this.
That's my party foul. Oh, man.
Nobody and it is literally a foul that is at the core of it. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to see you hit a quota because you called 97 of them other years and you called 36 last year. People like that. No one wants to see an excess of flags, and these are always the ticky-tack fouls, typically. Yeah. These are like the quick grabs off the line of scrimmage, the little, impediment with like the arm, like a mild jersey grab. These are going to be the flags that absolutely drive you bonkers. When it's 3rd and 12 and the play goes for 4 yards, you think you've got a punt forced. Oh, wait, there's laundry on the field. A ticky-tack automatic first down penalty is going to affect so many games in the first 4 weeks. Fans will get mad, coaches will get mad, and they will soften the emphasis. It's absurd.
Awful stuff.
Who's next?
Nobody likes refs.
No, nobody likes
I can
refs.
go next.
All right.
So this last week, Anthony Barr signs with the Dallas Cowboys. That's not my party foul. My party foul is Vikings fans acting like that is some grand betrayal. Players can go where they go. The Vikings weren't interested in bringing him back all that much. He's in his retirement tour, and every player can do that. Go chase whatever football opportunities they will get instead of being beholden to some weird loyalty to a team that has that drafted you. That's not what guys like Joe Cap and Alan Page fought for way back in the day when they were trying to get a real free agency. That choice is up to the players, and they don't owe fans anything. We love Anthony Barr, and I love the time he gave to us, and I'm very excited about his time as a Viking, but it's okay that he's ready to move on to a team that's ready to embrace him, and I wish him all the best. And if you were real mad about that, and a lot of people were real mad about that, I think you should maybe think it over a little more.
Nice Joe Cap drop there.
Yeah, Labor King.
Yeah. I'm going to go, why not? Let's go back to the Browns. They've had their fair share of party fouls. The Browns denying or declining Kareem Hunt's request for a trade. You should at least explore the option. Kareem Hunt obviously is a good back with a checkered past. The Browns, A, could get rid of people who have checkered pasts for their own sake, but B, have a remarkable stable of running backs. They don't need Kareem Hunt, despite the fact that Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb are the best 1-2 punch of running backs in the NFL right now. Trade him away, get a better draft pick, rely on AAF superstar and former Orlando Apollo, D'Ernest Johnson, to be your backup running back, and know that your offensive line will help produce in a big way. I know that Chubb and Hunt are fairly unique in their ability to produce beyond what their offensive line give them, but you are an analytics-based organization. Andrew Berry, get some draft capital for Kareem Hunt. That's the party foul. I mean, I was going to take Sam, so I had to rack my brain. I'm sorry that this one was kind of pathetic.
You went to ESPN.com and saw the first headline and made a party foul out of
it? I typed NFL into news.google.com.
Very precise URL. It's time now for our Mystery Monday guest of honor. You know him. You love him. He writes for the Pioneer Press. He also covers the Minnesota Wild, along with the Minnesota Vikings. His name is Dane Mizutani, and he just finished up a Minnesota Wild event of some kind. Dane, was Kirill Kaprizov there? That's all I care about.
Kirill was in the locker room behind the scenes of where the actual event was happening. The event, not a big deal. They're going to put a jersey patch on the jersey this year, and I got tricked into going. So,
are they going to do a prisoner exchange between Brittany Griner and Kirill? Is that what's going to happen?
Kirill's back.
He's back.
Kirill's back. He's back, baby. He was at Canterbury on Thursday, like a true Minnesotan. While they're posting on Instagram and Twitter like he never left. So I think we're pretending like the whole Russia thing didn't happen.
Just never happened. Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, that is a weird situation for Kirill, not to make this like Locked On Wild, but for Kirill now, it's like, does he go back home next offseason and next offseason? Like, is he comfortable going back to Russia as long as the climate is the way it is? That seems like a bummer of a situation to be in, where that's kind of like at the forefront of your mind every time the season ends. You just want to go home, and you're like, am I going to be able to get out? Like, what do I do here? So, I mean,
are we
Dane,
still
has
asking
he?
Russian athletes about their geopolitical opinions about the state that controls their mother country? Is that still a common practice?
I
Yes,
wouldn't know.
that is.
And if
that's
not, can we?
absolutely still happening.
Has Kirill talked yet publicly?
No, and if I had to guess, the way the Wild have handled Kirill, like he won't talk about this, and we'll get to training camp. Yeah, I lean with you. Like, I understand like news and stuff, but like, dude's family still lives here. He's like, his best friend is his brother. Like, what is he gonna really tell us in a 5 to 10 minute interview? That, man, thank God that. Whereas the 5 to 10 minute interview could literally impact the rest of his life. So doesn't matter. He's back in Minnesota. That's, I think, all anyone should truly care about if you are just a Wild fan hoping the Wild are going to be better than average next year.
Yeah. Dane, you've been out at Vikings training camp quite a bit. You've written about Cam Bynum, a good story. You wrote about Harrison Smith. You've kind of been locked in on that safety position. So give me your best read on how that looks entering the season and what role Lewis Cine plays in it.
I feel like right away, like when people were when Lewis Cine was drafted back in April, or people were like, he's definitely going to start next to Harrison Smith. I think it was probably a little bit misguided at the time. He was a late first round pick. A lot of times even if you're a first round pick, it takes a little bit of time to get up to speed on, where you need to be a starter in the NFL. And I think we're seeing that kind of happen through training camp. I think we saw it a little bit in OTAs, but certainly in training camp, Cam Bynum has been the starter next to Harrison Smith. And that's fine. I don't think that's an indictment on Lewis Cine. He's rotated in here and there. Harrison got a vet day, I think, last week, and we saw Lewis Cine next to Cam Bynum with the ones technically, with the caveat that obviously Harrison Smith was not there. So I think when you look at things like that right now, if Lewis Cine was the starter week 1, that would shock me. I think Cam Bynum has obviously earned the right to be that starter right now. With the way he's played in the past, he was great in his transition from corner to safety last year. And Lewis Cine, I think, just needs more reps, and that's fine. I think the interesting part is that gonna run 3 safety sets. I think you're going to see all 3 of them on the field at times. And that will give him, the ability to play fast, to play, with some reckless abandon. We've seen, the highlights of his hits, from his time in college. I think he brings a lot there, and I think it's okay if he's not the starter week 1.
I was going to ask about that. I'm very curious to know about what's going on at the lower levels of, everywhere, but in particular, the lower levels of offensive line. Can you tell us anything about guys like, obviously everybody's asking about Wyatt Davis, but I'm even curious about guys like Kyle Hinton or Blake Brandel or Oli Udoh. Is there anybody in those lower levels that might snag a roster spot that we don't really expect in all of our chalk 53 predictions?
Sure. I think right now, obviously, I think Oli's going to be on the team. For all the the weaknesses and negatives surrounding Oli last year, I think the fact that he's kind of a swing tackle, he's shown the capability to play tackle, guard. I think that's going to be something that pushes him over the top in certain areas when we're talking about fringe roster players. Wyatt Davis, I don't know. That's a great question because I think last year we had this idea that Zimmer hates him. Zimmer hates rookies. Wyatt Davis is really good. They're just keeping him, hidden, in this closet, but no one's letting him shine. But here we are in the 2nd week of training camp, going on 3rd week of training camp, night practice tonight on Monday. And Wyatt Davis isn't really running with the twos. He's with the threes. He might just stink. Like, we don't know a lot about Wyatt Davis. And I think because he was drafted in the 3rd round from Ohio State and had this pedigree about him, like, we were like, oh, this guy has to be this right guard of the future. He's a diamond in the rough. They found him in the 3rd round. He, stick him in and he's going to be a pro, a Pro Bowler. I don't know. I haven't seen anything otherwise yet. And unless he kind of shows out in the preseason, I think the Wyatt Davis smoke, maybe it's a little bit past gone. So other than that, Blake Brandelli's always been someone who can, at least fill in a pinch. Same with Kyle Hinton. I think those guys probably are more destined for a practice squad at this point. I think they'll keep around 9 offensive linemen. And if you just do the math, they're going to run out of time in space pretty quick.
Yeah, it is crazy that really none of the 3rd round picks from last year have improved their stock whatsoever. And we thought that, part of their failure to impress was because of a stubborn coaching staff. But Mond, Surratt, Davis, Patrick Jones, I can't say I've seen any glimpses from any of them. But the irony is, Dane, is that you go further down that draft class, Nwangwu looks great. Bynum looks great. Smith-Marset looks improved. Zach Davidson could be a factor. Like, the 4th and 5th rounds were actually pretty great from last year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, like you mentioned, Nwangwu, the first, obviously he's a kick returner and he's dynamic and showed that ability last year. That's someone who, even if he doesn't get a ton of touches on offense, like, that was a good draft pick because you got a specialist who can do something that not a lot of other guys on the team can do. So if you take that, Kenny Nwangwu, and compare him to anyone that you picked in the 3rd round, like, Nwangu's impacting winning at a better rate than any of those 3rd round picks. I think the same could be said about Amir Smith-Marset this season, because even if he's not going to beat KJ Osborne out for that number 3 spot, I think you'll see him work into that slot and bring speed. Wes Phillips was talking speed at 3. Like, that's like a, football term. Like, if you have speed at 3, like, that can create mismatches and advantages. I think we're going to see Amir Smith-Marset used in that role. Not all the time, but at times, which I think, going back to the 3rd round picks, is more than can be said about Kellen Mond, more than can be said about Patrick Jones, more than can be said about Wyatt Davis. So, yeah, for all we want to criticize about, the 3rd round picks, I guess it is fair to say, like, those later round picks have been, I guess, better than advertised, at least at the start when they were taken off the board.
I think if you look at any team that has switched its front office, like, take a team that switched GMs like 2 years ago, or look at, 2 years into a GM's tenure, and just go cross out the ones that were drafted by the last guy, and you'll just see how much turnover there tends to happen. When you drafted someone, if you had a coach on your staff pounding the table for Chaz Surratt, you might be a little bit more willing to give him a year or two and say, he's really not there yet, but maybe some more development. You'd be a little more patient with him. But these guys all came in. They didn't pick this guy. They didn't pound the table for this guy. There is no, like, Adam Zimmer's reputation might be on the line if he can fix or turn Chaz Surratt into what he thought Chaz Surratt was. That vision is gone. And now you can say, well, I don't know who this dude is. I'm sorry he was a 3rd round pick. But if he's not good enough to be on the 53, he's not going to be on the 53. This is my linebacker room now. And you can, that is a thing that tends to happen. The old depth pieces, the draft picks you were hanging on to just in case maybe they turned it around or had some bump in the middle of their rookie contract, those go away and you get a roster filled with guys that you had a vision for, that you understand the point of. And I think we're going to see, we might see that might lead us to do things like cut a 3rd round pick in his 2nd year, which otherwise would be a pretty rare thing to happen.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Like, it's just, at this point, you look at, they don't have any allegiances to these guys. And I think a lot of times that you're right, can be a reason to hold on to something. You don't want to admit you were wrong. Like, if you're Rick Spielman and you invested this draft capital into this guy, there is a temptation to just hold on to him and be like, he's going to work out eventually. Like, don't worry about it. When instead of just saying I was wrong. So I think you're right. Like, Kwesi comes in, he has no allegiance to the Rick Spielman players. O'Connell, same thing, no allegiance to the Zimmer players. That might cause for some interesting things on cutdown day in a couple weeks here.
Yeah, and I think an interesting case study to that effect is Kellen Mond. Do they have any allegiance to this guy at all? They're clearly wanting to give him a chance, letting him run with the twos. But on the other side of the coin, they didn't really have any connection to Sean Mannion either. They didn't need to sign him, and yet they did. They did choose to bring him back, maybe at Kirk Cousins' request. I'm not sure. But they have this veteran backup who's more or less a good study partner and game manager, and really not a playmaker on the field, has shown nothing to the fact that he could win games. And then Kellen Mond, who the other regime drafted, has struggled now for 2 straight years. It seems like a major quandary at the QB2 right now, Dane.
Yeah, I got nothing for you there because I have no idea what you're going to do. And even rather than it, moreover than who wins the number 2 job, it doesn't matter because neither of those guys, I think, are very good backups in the league. Like Sean Mannion, I think, is like you said, a good study partner. I think he's going to be a really good coach. He's a great guy. But you saw him against Green Bay last year late in the season. He's not winning you a game. And he's not someone where you're like, if Kirk goes down, this guy can buoy us for 4 to 5 weeks and keep us in the race until Kirk's ready to come back. For all of Kirk Cousins' faults, he's far and away the one on this roster that can get the Vikings to where ownership wants to get. They want to be quote unquote very competitive this year. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is that on the roster, the quarterback on the roster who can get you to be very competitive. The guys behind him, though, if Kirk Cousins goes, whether it's Kellen Mond winning the number 2 job or Sean Mannion winning the number 2 job, like I just don't see a pathway for that being a very good scenario. I think the thing that Kellen Mond has working for him is kind of like you were saying, under the Zimmer regime, he didn't get a chance. It was Sean Mannion. We like the way he works with Kirk. We like that he's an old veteran guy backing up our franchise quarterback. We don't want anything to do with the rookie. I think the new regime with Kevin O'Connell, at least in practice and in training camp and in the amount that we're allowed to watch, and he's getting reps with the twos. And that's not something that I think we were seeing consistently through training camp last year, albeit Kellen Mond's a year older, but he wasn't getting reps with the twos last year. I think he's going to be given a fair shot to win the number 2 quarterback job, whereas last year there was no chance he was winning the number 2 quarterback job. So regardless of who is the number 2 quarterback, I don't think it's a good sign if Kirk Cousins goes down. But I think it is at least intriguing through the preseason that there will be at least a battle, whereas last year there wasn't.
Lower tier wide receivers, the lower team wide receivers. I have heard so much about Myron Mitchell. I know he's been hurt, and I've heard a little bit about Tristan Jackson as well. So let's say Albert Wilson doesn't make the team. Jalen Naylor doesn't make the team. I know there's a third guy that's kind of in that same range that I'm struggling to think of. But who is the surprise wide receiver 6 that sneaks onto this team? Let's say you get the time traveler comes from the future and says, yeah, somebody you did not expect made it to wide receiver 6 and snuck onto the roster. Who is that guy going to be?
I think if it's a guy that we're not thinking about right now, if it's a guy that we're looking at projections and we're saying this guy's going to make the team, that guy's going to make the team, but if it's someone who comes out of left field, I think it's going to be Myron Mitchell just because he has some experience under his belt. The guy balls out in practice consistently. He's shown the ability to go over the middle. He's shown the ability to go over the top. I think if a guy like that can put together a good preseason, maybe it's enough to tip the scales if at the same time Jalen Naylor looks lost or, Dan Chisena doesn't get the roster spot as the punt gunner and take up a receiver spot. There are things that could work, but I think it has to be twofold. It has to be a guy like Myron Mitchell, who I guess you're asking the question, that's the guy who I would go with, is who would be the surprise 6. I will say it would be an extreme surprise 6 for me because I don't think he's going to make the team. But if there are guys that are right there or on the cusp of maybe they have a chance if things break right for them and things break poorly for someone else, I think Myron Mitchell could be that guy. He's impressive. He has great hands. He runs great routes in practice. And he's working with the twos and oftentimes the threes, so catching balls from Kellen Mond, Sean Mannion. not Kirk Cousins. So I think if you can look impressive in those roles, give him a couple big preseason games, and maybe he turns enough heads to sneak his way onto the roster. We've seen it in the past. I think Chad Beebe is a good example. He was a nobody, and by the end of preseason, he had made the team. So it's only 3 games, not 4 games anymore, a less time for people to prove themselves, but give Myron Mitchell 3 good preseason games, maybe he has a chance.
Outstanding. Dane, thank you. A utility player, covers the Wild and the Vikings for the Pioneer Press. How hard did you try to wrestle away that Vegas trip from Chris Thomason?
Vegas has defeated me enough. I'll let Chris have the preseason Vegas trip. I'll make my way out there during Wild season, enough to make up for not getting there in August.
Something tells me Chris is like a secret whiz at like Baccarat to roulette, and he's gonna come home with a pocket full of Benjamins. Dane Mizutani, the Pioneer Press. Thanks for being the guest of honor today, and have a good one, man. We'll see you out there at TCO.
Thanks, guys.
Mm-hmm. And that is the Minnesota football party for today. Arif, Luke, have a great time, gentlemen, tonight at the night practice.
Will do. I'll keep an eye on Myra Mitchell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'm Sam Ekstrom. At Sam Ekstrom, subscribe to the podcast, Locked On Sports Minnesota feed, or the YouTube channel, Locked On Sports Minnesota. For Arif and Luke, big thanks to Dane Mizutani. I'm Sam Ekstrom saying so long on the Minnesota football party.